taught any of the business stuff when you're in school.
Right. There isn't, a lot that we get besides the science and, medical nutrition therapy.
Exactly.
So let's kind of dive into the main factor that made you decide to, pursue having a freelance writing business. Because you did a lot of different things prior to kind of arriving and having Holly Larson Writes.
Yeah. I had a private practice, I think 8 to 10 years ago. And at the time, it's really scary to go out there and hang out your shingle and have your own business. I am still in a little college town and it's small. And I just had a scarcity mindset of I need to do absolutely everything in order to have any chance of having a profitable business. But of course, in retrospect, what actually happened is I burned myself completely out, not specializing in any one thing. And so the thing that I loved best of my business was writing. And I was hired for my previous full-time job because of the blog. They found me that way. And I enjoyed having the stability and that for a while. And then this past year, it was time for a change and just really ready to have as my own business again, but in a way to do it a lot better than I did the first time.
Got it. I'm going to type this quick thing in here because I want to just have everybody. Okay. Awesome. All right. Thank you for being so amazing, Holly, as I navigated the technical difficulty. So as you kind of kicked off your Holly Larson Writes business, was it really what you thought it was going to be? So I think many of us have an idea about, you'd already had a private practice where I think sometimes we learn that lesson of, you mentioned kind of running yourself into the ground as far as doing everything. So now you're deciding to start a writing arm, which is obviously something that you like. What was that experience like for you?
I think just really trying to tune into the work that really lights me up. I just love writing. And so I think just being honest about that and then learning ways to do it better as a business. So my thoughts about writing in the past were that you go for big magazine articles and that's how you do it. And that's one way to write. But those are fewer and further between. So in order to have a consistent business of writing, what you need are clients, so people who need you on an ongoing basis. And those maybe are not the same kind of price as publishing in a big magazine, but you can make a really great business with just a few clients. So that was something I needed to learn and shift my mindset about how to do writing in a way that feels good and can support me in the life I want to lead.
I love that. So what surprises did you have? Like what maybe wasn't what you expected? And I think you made a really good point about writing for large, magazines or really well-known publications, that we have this idea, just like maybe we do with a private practice or, working in a hospital, of what something has to look like. So I would be curious to hear what other surprises you had as you kind of got underway.
I think I just love the clients I have now are all really different in the way that they're running their own businesses, so that the support that they need from me and the writing that I'm doing for them is all really different too. And I just think it's so cool that with our degree, there's literally nothing you can't do. There are just so many ways to be a dietitian. And the more that we can get that word out there that you can be a dietitian and help in so many different ways, I just think is so cool.
Yeah, I'd be curious, for those people listening in, just what your thoughts are about what does freelance writing, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? And I would be curious to see what the type of writing people are interested, in doing. So, but if you're a writer, you have to get writing gigs, right? You need to find work. And one of the things that I hear is, struggling to find paid writing opportunities. So everybody's experience is going to be different, and I want you to share yours about what did you do to find work?
Good. Such a good question. you're never done looking for work, which is part of the bravery of being an entrepreneur, is that you're not guaranteed a regular paycheck. So you're always looking for the
Hustling.
thing. And that's fine. Part of it really for me is starting with the right mindset that you have something of value to offer so that people, I think, can smell desperation, and it's scary to put yourself out there. But if you are working on your own mindset of you have something really special to offer, that comes across as you're reaching out to people.
Mm.
In terms of actually finding clients, I cold email. So good old fashioned, not like cold calls, but cold email. And it's important to lead with value. I think we just want to share every single thing about ourselves and every single thing we've written, when really you need to talk about the client and how you can help them, and then follow up. People are busy. So just to have professional check-ins and nudges to see if this is the right time or not. Don't be surprised that it takes a while to get that traction. That's completely normal.
Can you give an example of, like, if you're cold emailing, what would, making it about them look like? Like, maybe give an example. I put you on the spot.
Well, I think that it's really good to have a good email subject headline so that it's personalized. People love compliments, so saying things that, like, I love to use the headline or email subject line, loved your website, here's what's missing, because that leaves a little intrigue. Be like, what's missing from my website?
Yeah. Okay. What do they call those? Open loops, right? Where someone has to close the loop. Those are highly effective, right?
Well, that's fun. And then you're like, I noticed you haven't posted in a while. Is that something you'd like some help with? Are you not getting good traction with what you're writing now? How can I help you write more effective blogs?
Mm-hmm.
Or noticing an opportunity like Google prefers longer blogs for SEO purposes. And if you notice they're publishing regularly, but they're really short, they might not be performing as well on Google.
Mm-hmm.
So just leading with value and that you have something to offer and you can help and see if they're the right fit. But also know that to some degree, it's a numbers game. You have to reach out to a lot of people before you're going to get your clients. That's completely normal. Um, and I also think it's just important to show up. So you can show up on LinkedIn, you can show up in Facebook groups, you can show up on Instagram, you can have your own TikTok. You definitely don't need to do everything because you will get burnt out. But showing up and leading with value is how people learn about you and get to know you and want to work with you too.
Yeah, no, that's really good advice about the numbers game of, we know it, whether it's a digital product, that converts at 1% to 2%, or writing, or, getting a client to sign on as a private practice. Everything, it's maybe cold hard truth to say it's a numbers game, but getting no's is just part of,
Just
running a business.
and for me, working with people who typically are solopreneurs, it's really scary and vulnerable to share your work with someone. So I try to have so much respect for that of it's hard to pass the reins.
Mm-hmm.
So we always start with, when you work with me, I always start with a test project.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a chance really for both of us kind of to interview each other and make sure that we're a good fit for each other.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just you seeing if I'm a good writer. I also want to know if you're a good client to work with. Because if you're going to email me 700,000 times in a day,
Yeah.
that might not be the right client for me.
Yeah.
But it's just a chance to get our flow and see if we're a good fit for each other so that it's a productive and valuable partnership.
Yeah. And I can, speak, personally to, getting an email from Holly, and I get tons of, like, what I consider to feel very spammy business type requests, people wanting to do X, Y, or Z for you. But, you could tell, I think that mindset, of that you have something unique and special to offer, and that you were coming from a position of, adding value. You definitely, have a good approach there. Be curious, like, what didn't work? How did you fine tune kind of this process of sending out emails? Does it really just keep after it and kind of study what works? Curious.
Um, Definitely trial and error. You can track open rates on emails, even just sending one emails through Gmail, there's a plugin that you can use called Boomerang.
Oh.
And so you can see who is opening your emails. And it's really just a numbers game to some degree.
Huh. Is that if you have like G Suite, you can have
Mhm.
that? Okay. That's a really good helpful tip, because you might be more apt to follow up with people multiple times that open maybe the first one. And they might be curious. And maybe if they open the second one, you're really after them, right?
Let's work together.
Let's work together. So let's kind of talk about the type of writing. So, kind of asking people, what do you think of? There's lots of different, writing. I, mentioned writing blog posts, but as a business owner, I feel like you can spend your entire life writing, whether it's copy for your website, your email newsletter, I have so much writing. And that's one of the reasons why, I decided to outsource some of that. And I actually outsourced some other writing as well. You can't, there's just have to decide how you're going to spend your time and what, is there a return on investment for the work that you're going to hire out? And some of that's a little bit of a leap of faith, right? You have to, what do they say? You have to, investment precedes kind of the profit, right? You have to make that investment, which can be a little bit scary.
Absolutely.
So how have you, the type of writing that you've done, like maybe changed, and who you write for as you've kind of started, and then what was your, the type and your client, and then how has that changed?
I think in my first time through with entrepreneurship, I just kind of thought that people were just going to be knocking on my door and just inviting me to write because it happened once. And so I just thought, well, great, this is just going to keep happening. And of course it doesn't. It was just lucky. So it was a great opportunity to do some of those bigger publications. That's not really how it works on an ongoing basis.
I sure wish it was, right?
I wish it was. For me, deciding that my niche is working to write for dietitians in private practice almost felt like childbirth. You're supposed to know who is your ideal client, who are you working with, how are you helping? And it's like uncomfortable and you're thinking through it. And then finding like, this is who I want to write. And then I told someone about it who's another writer, and she's like, no one has money for that, who's a dietitian. So I was a little crushed. It's like, oh no. And probably some dietitians don't have the budget to hire, but I needed to kind of move past that and trust my own gut that there are dietitians who wanted to hire me, and it was true. I love working with different kinds of dietitians. That keeps my work interesting, and I'm learning new things. So I just like that even though I'm writing, I'm learning about all different kinds of topics and doing different types of writing. So starting with blogs, emails to put into an email list, website copy, and even things like email sequences for people as they have an opt-in.
Social media posts. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, so there's just a lot you can offer as a writing service, and it's great to specialize in one. It's great to offer different ones. It's just whatever lights you up and gets you excited, because that's going to come across in your work.
Right. No. Your point about coming to kind of childbirth with your, your target client, your niche, I think that's, a really important point that you made, that sometimes we wait to get kind of maybe started before we have it all figured out. And, I'm a firm believer that you figure it out as you go. You don't figure it out before you go. And maybe not everybody has that, but for me, I probably wouldn't be a tenth of the way that I am in my business if I hadn't have just been willing to figure it out on the go. So I'm curious if that's kind of been your approach as well.
Oh, absolutely. But I also think just as important as being willing to try stuff and to be gentle with yourself, that making mistakes and things not going well are a totally normal part of the process. It's also just important to have your community of fellow entrepreneurs who get it, because people who are working a traditional 9-to-5 job don't. And there can be a lot of well-meaning comments coming from a place of love, but that's not necessarily the same as understanding. So my first time around with entrepreneurship, I didn't have that same kind of community. So things that if someone was just a little further along in an entrepreneur journey could have just said, you're doing great. This is totally normal. I think it would have been a different thing. But right now I have several great communities who we can bounce ideas off each other, troubleshoot things, and just as important to celebrate wins.
Right. No, that's really sound advice about, things are going to go according to plan, and you're going to make mistakes. So, the challenge of, we talked about the big things that I hear, right, with writing. I'm not a freelance writer, of course, but, is finding work and then getting paid well for the work that you do, or fairly. How have you handled the kind of setting your prices, and of course the big one of doing unpaid work? So this is kind of a big hairy ball here that I'm just going to toss right over to you, because I think this is from lived experience, right?
Good question. So I'll start first with, in general, I don't think you should ever write for free. I think there are a few exceptions. Maybe starting out, if you're doing a trade for a testimonial, so there's still an exchange of value, so that you have more portfolio pieces, great. But in general, writing can be a race to the bottom, and people ask writers of things that they just would never say to other professions, like you get good experience or good exposure, which you would never say to a dentist or a grocery clerk or anything else, that just like, I can also get paid.
Yeah.
Pricing is very personal, but I think that having a price that, as you have the transaction with something, that it feels good to both of you is the right price. You also, as a writer, need to think about what your goals are for the year and what that breaks down to the month and then to a week. And then how many pieces is it realistically to fit into a week to get the big goal? And to not undersell yourself. Your expertise as a dietitian and everything else that you learn to be an effective writer has value, and that comes across. Yeah. In terms of protecting yourself, what I was taught and what I would also recommend is that you get a 50% deposit. And that way the writer and the client are sharing risk, so that if I had a shady client, unlike you, who might take my work and then go, I would have at least half of the money. And I think that it hasn't happened to me yet. I think it's bound to happen at some point, but that's how you can protect yourself as a writer, is to make sure that you get a deposit.
Yeah. I mean, having hired quite a bit, I think most professionals ask for a deposit. Even a plumber a lot of times asks for a deposit before they come and do the work, just to save time on their schedule. So, but I also think it's this mindset element that you talked about at the outset, that, I'm bringing something of value. And I think we tend to throw that mindset aside and don't put as much, value as we should. Even just what we think of ourselves, and sometimes days that don't go as well, or the talk that happens in our head, how important what the conversation around ourselves and how we feel about ourselves is to our success every day. I can think of the times where I've wanted to throw in the towel or just not felt good. It's when I let those trains of thought start to really spiral down into, I'm not good enough, I'm never going to do this, it's not all those things. And really, I'm wondering if you mentioned mindset, what's been helpful for you to stay, it's not really to stay positive. I'm not sure that's very cliche.
It's such an important question. One of the training courses that I've done to be a writer is called Write Your Way to Freedom. And it's this wonderful writing course. It's not dietitian specific, but it goes all through the technical and business aspects of how to launch a writing business. But the very first thing that is talked about is your mindset and having a good morning routine, because that really can just set the foundation for having a productive day. I think sometimes we get ourselves in trouble with too many shoulds. Like, we should work 8 to 4, 9 to 5, 8 to 8, whatever it is. But I think you as a business owner need to assess, when are you the most productive? When do you have those pockets of time? And that's the right time for you to work. That's the cool thing about being an entrepreneur, is you get to decide stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we went into having some freedom, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for people, we talked about types of writing, and you've done a lot of ghostwriting. Can you talk about your, well, one, what is that? How is it different from other kinds of writing? And, maybe some of your own, I guess, deciding around the type of work that's important, like, is my name on it, right?
Good question. Actually, for all of my dietitian clients, it's all ghostwriting. And it's kind of, I don't know, almost like playing a part, because you're trying to step into the client shoes and how they talk about things and their voice, because they need to feel good about posting that on their website and their email list serve and on their content. And it has to sound like them. So I'll go through, you learn a lot by rewriting things by hand. So I'll go and rewrite some of their blogs that they've already published by hand to try and get into their mindset. And of course, that makes things take longer. So that's why hiring a good writer, there's a lot going behind the scenes that you wouldn't necessarily know. But there are a lot of pieces of what happened. So I think it's cool to just kind of try and channel their voice, the way they say things. Some of my clients are more informal and playful, and some people are more formal. And that's great, because that challenges me to write in different voices.
Mm-hmm. So part of me, for being kind of, ignorant about freelance writing. So people who want to write for maybe large publications where they're, getting a, a byline, because there's different ways. You talked about monetizing, right? I have to make this much, I'm looking at this much for the month or the quarter. Is the compensation approach different if you're really looking for ghostwriting? Is this more of this ongoing recurring versus I wrote for a larger piece and then I'm going to write and it's higher for each? I'm just curious, because I'm wondering what, as you're doing mostly, ghostwriting, what's the impact there?
In terms of the budget and cost.
Yeah, and just like your goal, is it different if you're a writer and your goal is to get in these major publications versus, I'm going to ghostwrite and have a portfolio of people that I'm writing for?
Yeah, I mean, we can't fib. It's really fun to see your name in print. So for things that I've published, it's really cool, and I share it with, every human I know, because that's fun. But those just tend to be harder to get consistently. So it's really nice to have those in your portfolio that you can show clients, say, this is public, it has my name on it, it's out there. So that helps to lend to your own expertise as a writer. And then some clients will let you share blogs that you've posted as a ghost writer as an example. You should probably ask permission.
Right, naturally.
But in terms of having a business, having clients where you have steady work with them as clients come and go, which is totally normal too, then your income is not fluctuating quite so much versus like big project, dry spell, big project.
Got it. Kind of more of an ongoing work approach. Got it. So you mentioned this trial period before, and I want you to talk a little bit more about what that is and what it looks like for you, because maybe it looks different for somebody else. And mentioned it that it helps decide if they're a good fit. But just walk us through what that means for you.
Yeah, I think there's so many ways to be a dietitian, which is really cool. And there are a lot of ways to be a writer too. And if you are wanting to be a writer, just to know you're not going to be the right fit for everybody. And that's nothing against you. So don't try and force something if it's not a good fit. So having a trial period is a chance to see how people are as clients and the kind of work that they're wanting. Are their expectations matching your expectations? And do you have a good process so that you're in a good flow with your writing? So some of my clients have more detailed outlines. Some of my clients have more just a generic topic, and I kind of flesh it out and give an outline and they approve it and come back. I wouldn't really say there's a right or wrong answer. I kind of have a different process. It just kind of develops organically, really, with each client.
Got it. So that, trial period really gives a chance for, I think, both of you, right, to decide. And, having, been on the other side, it's nice to, have that opportunity to kind of try something and see. It actually makes the door easier to walk through from the client's perspective as well. So I think it's super smart because as a business owner, if, you're writing for other dietitians, you want to feel like no harm, no foul, right? We're going to give this a try. It's, I think, easier to walk through that little trial door.
I hope so. That's the idea.
Yeah. So how do you define maybe success during this, when you're trying it out, and what are some things that you do to kind of maybe as the process is ending, or maybe, move things along, I guess. So you've proposed this trial period and, an article or something that meets the client's needs.
I think just being open to feedback. And it's so hard. You want everyone to like everything, and that's normal. But just like what worked, what didn't, be open to feedback. And that's part of having to develop a little thicker skin of what's working, what's not. Um, in terms of process, I like to do everything in Google Docs so that as clients, I share that with my proofreader first, and then I share that the completed first draft with my client, and then they get to do comments, edits, questions right in there. And that helps everyone get to be organized, which is so good.
Very good. Now, saying no, like if you're trying to grow your writing business, if we're looking for paid writing gigs, it can be really hard to turn away, or maybe if it's not quite great, but they'll might hire you. How do you say no, and what's been your experience with that?
I think it's important not to just assume that what someone is offering is normal, like offering you like little pittance, or just for exposure or things like that. You can be paid well and make a good living as a writer. You just have to find the right clients. So it's so much easier said than done to not be desperate or to have that mindset of just like wanting the next thing. So working on yourself and having confidence and reaching out with that helps you to get the right clients.
What's been
And
your
if you
most successful way that you've found? I mean, we talked a little bit about where you've picked up clients, but what's been the most fruitful?
word of mouth, really, virtual word of mouth. I just have a new client who's starting, who a web designer referred her to me, and we just kind of interacted a little bit on LinkedIn. So I didn't even know that she was referring, but I asked, like, how did you find out about me? And she said, so then we had an email this morning. I said, thank you so much. That was really great. Um, so I think just
word
showing
of mouth, right?
Mhm. And people knowing that you're looking for writing work, if they see something, I've been tagged in posts for looking for a writer.
Mm-hmm.
I think just doing your best to do a good job and putting yourself out there and showing up, um, and reaching out as you're looking for more clients, like several cold emails every day, several LinkedIn messages every day, and it builds. It can feel slow, but it will build.
Yeah. You're very organized. Can you maybe talk a little bit about, there's a lot of moving pieces when you're running a business, right? You've got you just mentioned you have many different clients who all kind of have a different approach. You've got these, kind of trying to fill the queue, right? How do you stay organized, both with kind of running your own business, but also running the writing projects, which I kind of almost, they're the same, but different.
So things like from the business end of keeping track of expenses or things like that, as much as you can automate, that's the best. Um, so just having a business debit card so it automatically goes to your invoicing software, anything that you can automate, the best. I don't actually have a super complicated system for keeping track of clients. I just put their deadlines on my Google Calendar and color code them as they're assigned, drafted, or submitted. I just don't actually need something more complicated than that right now. It works.
Yeah.
You and I use Trello, which I think is such great. And because of that, I'm going to use that with another client, I think coming soon. That's a great piece when there are more than two players, especially communicating.
Yes.
So that's been really good. But just to keep things in Google, all the comments in the Google Doc, all the deadlines on my Google Calendar, that honestly has worked for me. It hasn't needed to be more complicated than that.
I really appreciate that simplicity. I think there's a lot of tools out there focused on productivity, and if you have a system that's working for you, you don't need to complicate it with some other tools. So I actually appreciate that. A deadline on my calendar, color coded, it's totally working.
Let's do it.
Yeah, but you also mentioned using, Google Docs where, people can comment in real time. It definitely saves a lot of back and forth, or what section are you commenting on, and that's, I'm sure, very effective approach.
It also protects the material so that if, someone stole my computer or something, that it's not saved on my computer, the content that
right.
clients have paid for is still safe.
That's a good point as well. That's there. We always want to think about intellectual property or copyrighted material, right? Our writing products. So we've talked a little bit about client communication. Anything else that, we didn't touch on that you want to talk about in regards to, client work? If you have a client who you're working with regularly, or maybe someone who you did a one-off project with, maybe just talking about some of the different approaches that you might take.
I think one thing that might be helpful to hear is that it's really normal for potential clients to take a while to say yes, because it is a big decision to invest in blogs. I really believe in blogs. The data is there to support. They can be really robust arm of your business. You invest in them once, they get to keep working for your website, which is different than paying for ads or things like that. But it's still a big decision. So as much as I'm excited and want people to start, it can take a little while for people to say yes. And so just to not overthink it or to start doubting yourself and say, maybe they're going to say yes, maybe it's just not the right time, or maybe they're not the right client, and that's all okay. But sometimes it can take longer than you think for people to say yes, and don't start writing until they've paid their deposit.
Very good point.
In case they change their mind.
Yeah, that's because just because you say yes, you send the invoice, until it actually comes back, it needs to wait on that. That's a really, really solid tips there. I think, just kind of, personally, as the value of blog content, I decided to put more effort on, the blog, because for the very reasons you said, it kind of lives out there, and can continue to bring traffic. And if you have the systems in place that help to convert that traffic, a lot more longevity than I felt something on, social media even. And the reality of when COVID, 19 hit, that I had very little time for my business, less than I had, went from 20 hours a week to 6 hours a week of childcare. And I had to take a really cold, hard look at what I could do. and I decided to invest money in that blog writing. And, I had the best quarter ever, obviously, in my business, which I attribute a lot to the blog work, certainly that you've been doing, but, some other elements that it freed me up to do what you call your zone of genius. And it's very important that you're working in that, I think, space, whether you're working on a freelance writing business or another, that I think both of those things were incredibly valuable. So whether you say, I love writing, I do enjoy writing, but there's a limit to what you can do and maybe what's the most valuable for your business. So, I've really enjoyed working with Holly, but I'm curious if you might share kind of, metrics that you might use. You mentioned, setting up from a financial angle, like every quarter, but you also talked about sending out cold emails and LinkedIn messages. Do you have like a raw number that you're going to do every week or every day? And how do you hold yourself accountable? Do you have some kind of a dashboard? Talk to us.
Good question. Man, I would love to have a dashboard someday. No, I don't currently. I think the cool thing about writing is that you can scale it to the size that you want. So it's not my goal to be full time with writing. So I'm actually working the perfect amount for me right now. Um, I am launching a new program of a dietitian blogger club. So if anybody's listening who might want to join, it's going to be a membership where I get to coach writers and just kind of to provide some of that accountability that I think we all need for writing blogs for our own website. So maybe I can share a link for that later.
Yes.
So I wanted to delve into, from a business standpoint, I wanted to think about some scalable income for myself because writing is more one-on-one, one item. So I wanted to think about both a scalable income stream for myself as a business, as well as diversifying my business so that I'm not doing the same thing every day, even though like the writing that I'm doing is different. Hosting a club is different than writing.
Right.
And for people who might be interested in hiring me in the future, but are not in a point where they're able to, or that's not their focus in their business, this could be a good middle ground for us to still get to know each other.
Nice. So your blogging club is to help people who are currently writing their own blog that need the accountability to say, okay, I'm going to publish a post every week, or whether it's every month or whatever.
So the goal will be to do one blog a month as part of the club. Of course, you can do as many as you want, but one really good blog a month with feedback before you post, with learning and tools along the way so that each month you feel like a more confident writer. And then within the club, everyone sharing each other's stuff so that we get more traffic on everybody's content, which helps everybody.
Absolutely. I love that. There's a lot we can do in communities. However, the support of, real people and the accountability piece is always night and day, and whether or not you make it to your goal. Mm-hmm. So where can people go to learn more about you?
I live on my website, hollylarsonwrites.com, LARSON. Some people spell it EN. Mm-hmm. And then I'm on Instagram at Holly Larson Writes as well.
Yeah, and your website's really, a great example of, website for a writer. So if you haven't checked out, are you kind of thinking about, hey, how do I lay out my website? I remember getting an email from Holly, and I was like, oh, what's the first thing you do? You click on someone's website to see more about them. And I think your website, is great. So kudos to you. Yay. So is there anything else that you feel like we didn't touch on that you just kind of want to throw out there before we, wrap up?
Good question. I think writing is really cool. I think it's important to have nutrition experts in print and showing up to provide good information. And there are just a lot of ways to do it. So if you are interested in learning more, or if you're interested in trying that as a business or interested in delegating, there's avenues for all of those. I think sometimes a common question people ask is, do I have to commit to a certain amount each month? And the answer is no. Working with me, I think it's really normal for your needs to go up and down as an entrepreneur. So if this month you need this much work and next month you need this much, it's totally normal. Just whatever you need and whatever I can do is what I'm here for.
I love that. Holly, I had a great time kind of learning about your business. I think it was very, kind of transparent about, your background and what's worked for you. I've really enjoyed the conversation, and I'm really grateful that that you're writing for the RD2RD blog. It's definitely been something that I wanted to hire out for a while, but I think it's finding that right fit person. So thank you. And I look forward to seeing some questions and helping people, find your new coaching, which is super fun.
Thank you so much. It's been a blast.
Yeah. And we're now doing the RD2RD Live Show every month. So instead of every other week, I've moved back to every month until life is more normal, as we all have tried to find our new normal. So we'll be back here in November. Oh no, October. I don't even know what month it is anymore.
October.
It's almost here. All right. I will see you guys go again soon. Okay. Thank you, Holly.
Thank you so much.
Sorry for the little hiccup there. What a pain.
Hey, that is a-okay.
I have to figure out I have no idea what the different audio setting is. So that's going to be like finding a needle in a haystack.
Well, if you ever need to jump on as a tester just to see if it's working, let me know.
Yeah, I tested it, but I changed my settings a little bit today, but nothing related to audio. So super weird.
Hold through. Appreciate the opportunity very much.
Yeah, so now I'm gonna have to try to. I have no idea. But thank you for being here. Yeah, what was I thinking of? You mentioned